What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Borrow Lending DeFi series, a series that we take everybody from beginner, understanding the basics of DeFi. I know DeFi is a little bit scary, intimidating in a sense sometimes with all these crazy terms. So here we are, myself and Will, and I think Alex is coming to come show you guys what to do in DeFi, what makes Katana kind of special in a sense of like what we do. But as Alex is coming in slowly, surely to the show, I'm going to let Will introduce himself, a little bit about him, a little about his history in DeFi. If you're just catching up, what the Katana team is doing. But let me go ahead and pass the mic here.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm Will. I lead the engineering team over at Katana. My DeFi history is started with holding way back in 2017, I think, and then dug into the infrastructure behind it, spent a lot of time building infrastructure, spent some time over at Polygon before coming over to Katana. And yeah, super excited to be here and just love this educational campaign because you're right, like DeFi is pretty intimidating at first, and a lot of people operate based on assumed knowledge. So that's one of the goals here is to just translate that assumed knowledge into actionable steps so that you can make really good decisions.
Absolutely. And let me give you a little bit of my history as well. If for anybody that knows me, knows that like I'm a major DeFi guy. I came for the money. I was like everybody, right? And then I stayed for the mission. And then in 2021 is really when I started getting into DeFi. Ethereum mainnet was like super crazy expensive. Binance Chain was doing their thing, and Polygon just had these crazy incentives. So I actually started learning how to do borrow and lending on Polygon directly with the Aave, and like the incentives were crazy. And I wish I knew now here today what back then of how I could really have taken advantage of that with the looping strategies and everything that's on that mix to be able to like take advantage of what I could have before. Many times I talk to a lot of people that have earned a little money and they're like, yeah, I want to, put all my stables. I want to deposit it in Aave and just sit. And that's great. But then when you look at stuff like on mainnet, that's 3%. And I'm like, wait a minute, man. Like you could literally cash that out and just put it in a treasury yield and earn 4% with less risk. And if it's less than like a couple $100K, you have the FDIC insurance as well. So I'm like, why would you do that risk just to keep it on chain and do stuff? So it's like with DeFi and like with this knowledge that you have in this series, you can actually kind of like make passive income a reality in a sense, whether that's $2 or $200 or $2 million, depending on how much money you have. Once you learn those techniques, you'll be able to actually like do this forever. Like this is something that'll take care of you forever on there. So like it's one of those things that like it was hard for me to find because it's very PvP. And like when you're trying to find a good strategy or anything, people don't want to share because they don't want to dilute their position. Katana is a little bit different, right? And so that's kind of like the approach that I wanted to go like as a DevRel. And here's Alex. I'm going to bring him up on stage here once he's ready to go. But as a DevRel, I'm like, why would I make tutorials for the 10 people that understand DeFi versus the 90,000 other people that are curious about it, that don't have a good resources? So that's why I kind of made this series of like showing you what we do. I'm an actual user of DeFi. Like I know there's a lot of people in the space that don't actually use what they pitch. I have my money on Katana. I'm in the DeFi trenches, right? Like I've used it. I've lost money. I've made money. I've kind of farmed almost every chain possible in a sense. And a lot of the foundations are the same, right? I've have like 17 different wallets from all these different ecosystems, Sui, Aptos, Solana, everywhere. Foundations are the same, but some of the strategies can change. And that's something that I want to show with you. And now that we have Alex here, I'll let him do an introduction and then we'll do a quick, we'll jump right into it.
Yeah, GM everyone. Alex here, the token mechanism ecosystem designer, value flow guy, do the incentives, do the DeFi stuff. Also been wrecked many times in DeFi, kind of how I got into it, how I started to like, you get wrecked and you're like, well, let's find out why. And then when you do that, you dig into the mechanisms and you can truly understand this stuff. So looking forward to getting into the lending today.
100%. And one of the things that I kind of want to point out is like when I talk to people about Katana and they don't understand DeFi, it's kind of like when I watch the Olympics and like I see two people do 3 backflips, and one person gets a 7 and one person gets a 10. I'm like, they both did 3 backflips. Like, what's the difference, right? And until you know the details of it, oh, that one was way harder and it was way more technical, and that one was harder to pull off. Will you understand and appreciate what Katana's doing, right? Like, if you don't know, if you're borrow lending, okay, great, right? The number one thing that happened is when I'm checking out all these chains, when the incentives leave, so did I, right? And then I went to the next opportunity. It was nothing personal; it was just business. So, like, what happens when the incentives never leave, right? So, like, that's kind of the beauty of Katana, of like what could happen depending on how the flywheel works. So, I'm going to go ahead and just start sharing my screen and kind of get you guys intro in here. I've also posted on the tweet, if you have missed the first one, each one of these series is works off the next one, right? So if you missed the borrow lending one, I posted it on there. I'm sorry, not borrow, like the next one. I posted that on there so you can catch up or reference it from this one. We'll look at my position, and from that position, I'm going to create a new borrow lending position as well. But just a quick overview, if you are catching the series for the first time, this is Understanding DeFi 101, basically the foundation of everything that we do in DeFi, or what makes Katana kind of stick out as special. So last time, what was being covered was DEXs. We did impermanent loss, how people make money, which you see a lot of videos of, and then a lot of aspects of how people lose money, which you don't see a lot of content on, right? How to rebalance certain things and the risks, right? I'm all about risk. Today, we are covering borrow lending, like how to use your assets wisely, like what longing and shorting is, what are the things to look out for when you're choosing a DApp or, anywhere to put your money in, and the risks involved. I do a lot of risk analysis. I'm probably one of the most paranoid people in crypto because you see the stories, you see Rex newsletter, you see this all the time. It's hard for me to sleep when I put a large amount of money in, especially when it's like life-changing money. So I am the most paranoid person, and I think that's kind of like the best approach. in my opinion, some people just YOLO it. I don't. And then after this, we're going to be covering like PTYT tokens, perpetuals, and then Alex will be back again for the cat tokenomics on there, like why cat is something that is not a normal token for a chain, what makes that different on here. But enough of that. Let's get right into it on here. We're going to be covering lending markets. At any time, if you guys have questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments on there. I can't comment directly, but I will talk about it. And then Will, Alex, if you see anything that you guys want to chime in on, or if anything you want to put your own, 2 cents in, feel free to cut me off, keep me from being boring. And this is very like lax and chill. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So lending markets, right? I think I like this one. I think more people are familiar with it because they probably dealt with a bank in most times. So within this bank, usually you deposit your money into a CD or you put it into a checking account. What the bank does is then they go ahead and turn around and lend that money out to earn a profit, right? So the more people that deposit, the more money they have to lend out. So like every time we talk about crypto, is like, where does the yield come from? Well, the yield literally comes from the borrows, right? So we as users, we see this earn rate. Oh, I can earn 4% on my ETH, or I can earn like a couple percent on my USDC. Let me deposit that, right? And then they go ahead and turn around and say, hey, we'll let you borrow this USDC or this ETH that we have deposited at a certain amount for a 6% rate. And people are willing to do that because there's different strategies that they want to do that we'll cover it a little bit later. But ultimately, the bank earns 2% on all borrows, right? They're earning 6% on all these borrows. They're paying back the 4%. And in turn, they're keeping the 2% as a profit, right? So that can, earn themselves whatever, depending on how much volume you have. So as we go in here, like the way it works in crypto is it's over collateralized loans, right? And so in this space, when you can make a wallet on the fly, or you can make 10,000 wallets on the fly, it's very hard to identify who you are as a person, right? Proof of identity. Everybody's tried to do this. Anti-Sybil, nobody has figured it out. I mean, they're even like scanning eyeballs to try to figure out who you are. And then people are selling their eyeball scans. So like it's a never-ending battle of like trying to fight a way to move around certain things. So what we have here is basically over collateral. If you want to borrow something, you have to give me something of a higher value. That way you're incentivized in order for you to pay it back. Because if I can borrow something at a lower value, then why would I pay it back? I just walk away scot-free and there's really no penalty. They could ban my wallet and I just transfer the funds to another wallet and I start over again, rinse and repeat, right? So in essence, when you see something in a borrow lending market right now, it's most likely going to be over collateralized, where you have to put something of a higher value, right? And then you can borrow something at a certain rate, right? And so when, let's say I'm putting $1,000 collateral, I can't borrow $1,000 exactly because then I'll be dead even. You can borrow a certain amount of percentage just below it in order to do that. And then your interest will then start building, right? And so over time, your debt will increase yearly, in monthly. You could see it literally happening every second on the second when you refresh your page. So again, that's something that you get to do. And then with that money, you get to do something with your wallet, whatever strategy that you want to do. Bringing it over just so you can see the other side of that is under collateralized loans, right? This is more like credit cards or something like that, where you don't have to drop anything collateral. I know there's people that have been trying to do it in the crypto space. I don't know if you guys know of any projects, but every time I've seen it, I've always said, in 6 months, they're probably going to make an announcement that something went wrong. And usually I've been pretty right. So,
who could have seen that coming?
yeah. So in essence, I'm dropping, like buying a house or buying a car, you're doing a small deposit, right? Let's say $100 of ETH, and it's letting me borrow, a $700 with a larger interest rate because I'm taking more risk. So if there's more risk involved, there is more incentives for me to deposit certain things for that 25% interest, right? So the debt increased faster, so they have to pay back more, right? So that is something that works better if you can seize it, right? Like if there's a car that has a good value, I can go and seize it. I can pull it back or repo it, right? There's a whole industry on that. With crypto, because it's very sovereign, I can't pull the funds out of your wallet, right? So it's a very difficult thing. I'm very curious, and I watch very closely about like different projects that try to do under collateralized loans. So like if you know of anyone that has been working or anything, I'm very curious to check it out to see like how that works and whatnot.
3Chain.
Oh, yeah. Does that work? Well,
3Chain works. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'm very curious to see like how well that plays out. How long has it been running?
Since last year, I think mid last year. Still getting up to speed as far as I know. It's like less than 100 mil, but appears to be working.
Do you have any money in it?
I do not. actually, here's the detail. It's US people only, I think, actually. So
really?
I'm not a US citizen. Okay. So yeah.
Well, that's a good option. I like that one. I like that. All right. Well, yeah, I'm curious. So like, yeah, anybody in the community definitely interested to see, like, if you have any money in it, let me know. I'm very curious because there's a lot of cool stuff out there. But again, like I'm a very paranoid person. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to let the pioneers run it first. And if it's looking good, I don't mind missing out on some APYs and stuff. So back on track, like how much can you actually borrow depends on like what assets you can borrow with, right? Some assets are kind of like more higher valued in a sense than they are. So that's what we call something like blue chips, right? When you think of blue chips, you think of like wrap BTC, ETH, staked ETH and stuff like that. And it also depends on how much liquidity is available for that asset on the chain. Many times have I seen like different curation systems. One time I saw historically, I think it was Phantom Network, where there was the ability to borrow more than there actually was on the chain, right? So like, let's say they were allowed to borrow $100 million, but there was only $90 million on the chain. So when it came time to liquidate them, it didn't make sense because it would have destroyed the chain, right? So like if there is not enough liquidity on the chain, then it doesn't make sense for me to lend out that much, right? So there's a lot of analysis that has to happen of like how much you can actually borrow based on the value of what you have. If you have ETH and you want to borrow stables, it's kind of been standardized that you have about 80%, 85% that you can work with, wrap BTC. If you have stable to stables, they get you a little bit higher. We'll look into that a little bit deeper, but you have to be able to understand, like when you have like a certain asset of a token and it's not a blue chip, they usually don't let you borrow as much, right? Because you have the risk of bad debt, kind of like what I mentioned before. If that token value falls dramatically, then you have the bank runs the risk of running some bad debt, and we'll cover that in just a little bit, right? So like how does that platform stay healthy, right? In order for a platform to stay healthy, there has to be kind of liquidation incentives. If you don't pay back your loan, somebody else has to, right? Otherwise, we have this inept debt that we can never get out of. And I know you hear that term a lot. Oh, this one had bad debt, especially after October 10th, with this crazy drop in value. You saw a lot of that terms being flown around. So we'll cover that in detail as well. Well, who decides how much you can actually borrow in each assets? Well, there's a lot of different places that do that, right? DAOs do it. Like if you are working with like Aave, Compound, Venus, there are DAOs that will decide what tokens you can list on there, how much you can borrow off it based on the other asset. There's strategy managers, like strategy groups that will do this as well. And what we have curators, basically individual teams that will analyze the chain, analyze the token, and will ultimately say, okay, we can borrow off this. We can be a little bit more riskier here. But those are the kind of the terms that you'll see that determine based on what token you have, how much can you actually borrow in stables or another asset on there. So some terms to cover here, you're going to hear this a lot in borrow lending, is health factor. It's basically how healthy is your position based on how much you've over collateralized your value versus how much you've loaned. Your health factor is going to come in. We'll do a little bit of math on that. And then LTV is basically your loan to value. How much can I loan you based on the value of your initial asset? And then everybody's least favorite term, liquidation loan to value, right? At what point does your loan get so close to, you know, how much your collateral is that I can liquidate you, and then you pay a little bit of a haircut and you pay some fees to keep your platform healthy in a sense. And again, if I'm losing anybody or if anybody has questions, go ahead and ask. If you guys want to chime in, let's go ahead. But let's look about bad debt, right? So I was pretty close. ETH valued at 3,000. I made this like a month ago, and I was like, all right, let's say ETH 3,000 to keep it simple. I think it's around there, right? And so we have a scenario. We have ETH is $3,000 right now. Users have deposited $20,000 USDC right here. So they have $20,000 USDC in the bank, right? That is available for people to borrow. And I have 10 ETH at $30,000, right? So I'm sorry, 3,000. So it's equivalent to $30,000. I want to borrow that 20K, assuming that there's no protections and limitations. I can borrow the entire amount, right? And so that's 66% of my loan to value, right? And according to this bank, right, it's 80% is my liquidation threshold, right? So right now I've deposited 30,000 worth of ETH. I've taken out 20,000 USDC. So that was deposited. And now it's in my wallet. It's no longer in the bank. It's my wallet to do whatever I want with. I can pay bills. I can invest. I can do whatever I want, right? And let's say we have another 10 out of the blue, right? And so now ETH crashes to $1,800, like it's almost 50%, so 40% drop, right? Now my position is worth $18,000, right? Because it's an ETH. So I have 10 ETH, $18,000. And so I still have that $20,000 USDC. Everybody's like, oh, I'm nervous. I got to get out. I want to get out of this. I don't like it. But there is not $20,000 in the bank for me to take out, right? There is nothing for me to take out. Even until I pay back this loan, I do it. But why would I pay back this loan if all I'm going to get back is $18,000, right? So in a sense, the bank has bad debt to the users overall. So there is no protection system in there, like in this scenario where the users all basically take a haircut, right? It's like, all right, we can give you some, but we can't give you all of it. So everybody that deposited to earn this, you know, to put this $20,000 balance, well, you'll get some money back, but not all of it, right? And so that's what we call a haircut, and that's why we try to avoid bad debt, right? So that's kind of basically in the sense the asset falls so low that what was borrowed out basically doesn't get paid, or because the value was so low, it doesn't incentivize people to liquidate. But in a more realistic approach, we're going to go right into this, right, where this is a little bit more realistic, but I just want to show you how bad debt can happen. We're going to do that same scenario again with ETH $3,000. Users have deposited 20,000, right? And I want to borrow that position. Right here, my liquidation price is 2,499, right? And so that creates my health factor of, so ETH falls to 2,499. My health factor is 0.99. So just another scope on this for anybody that doesn't know about health factors. If your health factor is above 1, you're in a good spot. The moment it hits below 1, 0.09999, you are available for liquidation, no matter who you are. And this is what I love about DeFi. Doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or if a hundredaire or whatever, everybody's treated the same. So you can't make backdoor deals or anything. Say, hey, don't liquidate me. You know what it is. Everybody's incentivized to liquidate you, right? So the moment you hit 0.99, you can get liquidated, right? So my collateral is worth $24,999. I have that 20,000 USDC. The moment it hits this price, a liquidator can come back and say, hey, this person's not going to pay back their loan. It looks like they're not going to. Let me pay back some of this loan or all of it, depending on the platform. And we're going to balance you, and the bank's going to give me an incentive to do so. Right. So some other person can pay your loan back. And actually a key note on that, I know on front ends, you can pay your loan back, but like, let's say you're traveling. I use a hardware wallet in a lot of my positions, and I'm always a little bit nervous of like, well, what if I get liquidated while I'm traveling and I have a mobile wallet? Well, you can pay back your loan with another wallet through like the Block Explorer in a sense. So you can pay on somebody's behalf on that position. So kind of a little bit of alpha on there. If you're not, I don't know if not too many people know about that, but you don't have to pay back your loan directly from your main wallet. Somebody else can pay you back. Like you can have like a liquidation ferry or something that comes and pays back your loan, but somebody has to pay back your loan to keep this platform healthy. And if they do that on your behalf and they liquidate you, they take a piece of your money as a bonus to do so, right? So looking at
So in
that,
that
like,
scenario, you would be liquidating yourself to protect your larger investment, right?
no, you can actually repay. You can repay
Okay.
on behalf. So if you look at the Block Explorer, you can repay a half on behalf, or you can call the liquidation function. So depending on which function you call, I would call repay. Like, no one else is going to repay for me, to be honest. I'm like, hey, you're a good
Yeah.
guy, Billy. Let me get you. But liquidation function is incentivized. Repay function is not, right? So as me, I'm like, okay, let me make sure I repay this on here. And so for vibe coders that like, are kind of like experimenting with it, I'll actually create a workshop on that of like how I set it up, because I don't trust AI with my money at all, or private keys. So I have like this like Gnosis safe script that runs. So it'll have like a basically a delegation that has enough money to keep my platform healthy. So it'll pull it and repay. And it just has like a little thing that monitors. So that was something I'll definitely work on for when we get into like the basically coding series in a sense.
Right
But
on.
coming back, how do you calculate your health factor, right? Like, what is the health factor? And this is a formula that you will use all the time. It's basically across everywhere. Is your collateral value, like how much did you deposit? What's the liquidation threshold, right? Again, depending on the asset you're using, that's the liquidation threshold. So kind of coming back in, my LTV was 80%, right? And so, and then how much did I borrow, right? Based on how much I borrowed. So originally when I had, ETH was 3,000, I had $30,000. My liquidation threshold was 80%. I borrowed 20,000. My health factor was 1.2. If I had borrowed less, that number would go up. But when ETH dropped down to 2,999, then my value asset dropped to 24,999 times 80% divided by how much I had in debt, and that put my health factor to 0.99, right? In every DApp that you use, you'll see that where your health factor lives at any time. So you can always check your health factor. I also use DBank on here as well. And that also has your, one-stop shop for all your health factors on there. But I wanted to throw this calculation out here for you so you can kind of like do it yourself. But it's pretty straightforward on most apps. But if you wanted to run that, it gets more complicated when you start mixing things with different thresholds. Because if I had USDC on here, the liquidation threshold is a little bit higher. If I had like another token, I'm thinking like Curve off the top of my head, it has a different liquidation threshold. So you have to like basically change the liquidation thresholds to kind of get your balance. And there's a lot of tools out there, or vibe coders, if you want to build one, calculate my health factor based on these kind of things on here as well. So coming back in here, what are the risks, right? We see that all over the place. Risk for DeFi everywhere. So the number one is basically smart contract risk, right? Is there a bug in the code? We've seen that happen a lot of times. 2020, 2021 was insane. Like, it was basically all the food borrow lendings ones. Like, I saw a hack like every other day, whether they were using, whatever code, fork code with the bug. If they didn't know what they were doing, they were just forking it. Say, hey, same bug, same attack, right? Re-enter sheet is like every time. But let's say you had the most perfect audited code ever, right? You had 30 different audits from the best auditors, and that you got the best AI agent auditor or whatever. You still have Oracle risk, right? Because the way the EVM ecosystem works is it doesn't talk to the outside. So Ethereum doesn't know what the dollar value is at all. So what we use is we use oracles to sell us from the outside. Hey, what is the price of ETH? Oh, ETH is $3,000. Okay, let's create the market off that, right? But even if you have the most perfect code, your source of your oracle can mess you up, right? And we've seen that happen a few times where we have an oracle misreport. At my time at API 3, I've seen so many different ones happening because I monitor everybody's Oracle system. So I'd always say, like, who misreported today in a sense. So like, even if you have the most perfect code, the Oracle that you choose is also another factor. So when you're looking at depositing in what, let's say a Morpho market, Aave market, like what Oracles are they using? Are they using Chainlink? Are they using Redstone, API 3, Dia? Like there's tons of Oracles on there, Pith, and so depending on like your risk factor and like what their history is, you might want to check that as well. Then we also have the bad debt risk exposure. What tokens are they listing, right? Are they listing like blue chips only? Are they listing more exotic tokens? Did they list just this meme token that launched yesterday? If they did that, I'm not touching it, right? Because it's just too much exposure. We don't know the volume. We don't know the liquidity. You don't know what's going on. So you want to make sure that, when you're looking at the tokens, that there are tokens that, you don't mind being associated with in a sense, because in a little bit, I'm going to show you why that's a problem. And then governance, right? I don't know how many people have actually worked directly with DAOs, but man, it is crazy sometimes. And so sometimes your risk with governance can kill you. And sometimes we have these one-day proposals that you could go to sleep and wake up and the proposal passed and things have changed. And so that is kind of a risky thing as well. Also, like we'll cover in a little bit, Morpho, you can do vaults that can change strategies or market that can change strategies. So you want to make sure that you have enough time so you can make your decision of when to exit if you choose to do so, if people change their mind, right? When we think about smart contracts, we always assume that is locked in code, but governance can change those rules at any time. So you want to make sure that you kind of are on top of it. So with the set and forget guys, you want to make sure that your governance, is your governance check is on check in a sense. So exposure, right? So I just grabbed this one off the Aave one. No shade on Aave or anything. I think they're a great platform as well. But exposure, my USDC, right? If I popped in USDC here, I am also exposed to every one of these assets on the list that keeps going on and on and on, right? Because anybody else has the ability. Will can come in with his wrap BTC, Alex can come in with SUSDCE, and they can borrow my USDC. So therefore, I am exposed to those assets, right? When 1010 happened, and nobody really knew what was happening on Aave mainnet, there was a lot of ENA exposure. And so for me, I was like, man, I don't know if Athena is in good shape or not. That was just me and my own personal opinion. Like, I have exposure on mainnet, so I withdrew, right? Because I didn't want my money exposed to that asset. So whenever there's something that's kind of grouped up in a bit, you have to realize your exposure to that asset, right? These are like happens in like monolithic type of things where like everything's kind of grouped together in one where you can borrow, which is also great because, if I wanted to deposit USDC and I wanted to borrow USDC because there was like this looping thing, which I'll cover in a little bit, makes it a lot easier too, right? But again, you're not realizing what you're exposing yourself to. And so that way, when you look at something that I can deposit and people can borrow my assets, you have to look at what's happening on the left side of what people can deposit. Now they have isolated markets too and whatnot, but I just want you to realize, and a lot of people don't realize is that whenever you deposit into one of these monolithic, you're exposed to whoever else deposits in that asset as well that can borrow your assets, right? So you have to make sure that you do a little bit of risk analysis yourself. Again, DAOs are doing this and strategic monitors and curators are handling these risks as well. And if you trust them, great. But again, if you ever look at my Twitter banner, the number one thing it says is trust no one, right? Only yourself. So I always do your own analysis when you're watching this of like, how much risk am I willing to take for this yield? Am I willing to, take that risk for 3% on my USDC? I don't know. I wouldn't. It's just me because there's more opportunities somewhere else, right? So like more risk reward. Nothing is free in DeFi. There's always risk with everything, and anybody that tells you something that's risk free, that's a red flag. Run for the hills. Go somewhere else. Honestly. So yeah, just kind of like letting you know that like your USDC is grouped with every one of those assets, and that list goes down. All right, and then every chain of that initiation of Aave has a different form of those risks as well, depending on the chain. So coming into that, what changed is basically Morpho kind of changed the game quite a bit on here. If you've ever tried to list an asset in one of these monolithic ones and going through DAO governance, you'll probably never want to list again, to be honest, because it's a whole drawn out. You have to write like a 30-page thesis of like why it works, and you have to talk to delegators and whatnot. And Morpho came in and said, nah, let's just change that, right? Where you allow anybody to do permissionless markets right here, right? So when I'm looking at something like Aave, I want to deposit USDC, there's only one place that I could do that right here. Just boom, drop it in, and that's great. I think the simplicity of it is nice. Morpho added the ability to make permissionless markets, so we had multiple vaults. So the beauty of it was anybody can create a vault. The negative part about it was anybody can create a vault, right? So now you have 10 iterations of the same USDC vault of like, why does this work? So if we look at it a little bit closer here, you'll see something called vaults and markets, right? And so vaults is kind of like your savings plan where you can pop in your asset and it's going to earn yield for you. Curators are kind of handling that for you. These markets are where the borrow lending happens on each market, and depending on the reward you get is the risk reward. So if we look into details on that, if I was looking at this vault for USDC, it's giving me 4%. Why is that giving me 4%? Because they're only depositing into this specific market of wrap staked ETH and USDC, and they're giving you back 4% on that. There's another curator with another vault saying, hey, we can get you 5% for that for your USDC. We have a different strategy, right? And we can give that. And when we look into it, we'll see that we are putting our USDC into this exposure of wrap staked ETH and Wrap BTC. So they have double markets on here, and between the two, combining, averaging out, they're giving us 5%, right? And then there's another curator saying, hey, no, I can get you 6.67% with your same USDC because I run a different strategy, right? I deposit some here, and then also in this ETH USDC market at 10%, right? And so then they can generate you 6.67%, which is beautiful, right? But it becomes difficult to decide, well, I just want to put my USDC and like deposit and earn yield. So some people just kind of deposit into the highest earning vault, not realizing the risk, right? Not realizing maybe there's this exotic token that is earning 20%, but that is a very, very high risk. And you think you're fine because you're earning 10%, right? So you want to make sure that you analyze where the vault is actually putting their funds, how much they are. Sometimes it's not distributed, 33% across the board. Maybe they go heavy on this one and they do a little bit in here. So you got to look at how that risk distribution pans out, right? And then you as a user, you have to decide, okay, well, which vault do I want to go? What's the risk? And then you can even bypass all these vaults and go straight into the markets. Like, you know what? I like this market better. Let me deposit here in this zone right here. And I, don't want to deal with the vault and I want to earn 10%. You can absolutely do that, right? It is not very clear on the Morpho site, but if you go into the Block Explorer, you could. So that's an open opportunity for someone to say, hey, if you want to bypass vaults and go straight into the markets, you absolutely can. You can limit your exposure to one asset and one asset only. And I think that was the beauty of Morpho, is like when you go into a market, you are limited to one asset only. If you go into a vault, then you can open yourself up to more exposure to certain things, but more reward on here. And then as a borrower, you can choose the market. Yes.
So I think that's one of the things that's worth highlighting there is when you're looking at these vaults, you'll notice that it shows you who the curator of that vault is. Mm-hmm. And that's where you can go in and dig through, like you've got 3 USDC vaults to choose from, and then dig into that and you kind of have to dig for this yourself to go in and see exactly who that curator is, where that yield is coming from. And then the big question, I think, from that is, do I trust that curator?
Yeah. I was going to bring that in a little bit since we brought it up. I might as well put it on the screen. But yeah, like for here, Gauntlet wrapped ETH, you'll see that the curator is this, and you'll see that your exposure is limited to these two. So you can kind of like analyze what it is. Maybe that's just pretty pictures for a lot of people. So hopefully this helps you understand where that risk is for certain aspects on there as well. But all right. So why would anybody borrow, right? If I deposit something and I get no yield, why would I borrow, right? You want to make your tokens liquid, right? So for ETH, let's say I'm an ETH bull. Let's say I'm an ETH bull today in this market. I'm a crazy man, right? But I want to do something with my ETH, but I feel like ETH is going to go up. I don't want to spend it. I don't want to sell it. One, that's a taxable event, depending where you live, right? So I want to have some kind of like liquidity with my ETH. So for a long strategy, meaning long, I believe it's going to go up. I'm going to deposit ETH, and maybe just, maybe I deposit on Monolithic, maybe I deposit on Morpho, but I'm going to deposit ETH, and it's going to allow me to borrow USDC at a certain percentage. Let's say I'm borrowing it at 15%, right? And so I have 20,000 USDC dollars. So I have my ETH stuck in there. Let's say it's $30,000. I borrow that USDC, right? In my wallet, I can do two things, right? I can go to another vault. Maybe there's a vault that gives me 20%, right? I'm paying 15%. I'm paying 20%. I'm earning 20%. So I'm netting 5% for doing nothing, right? Based on my ETH. Or if I'm a much of a believer, I can buy ETH and ETH goes up 20% tomorrow. I sell that ETH and I pay back my loan and I get back my original ETH, right? So I'm basically creating liquidity for my ETH to be able to do more things. Maybe I want to use my ETH to buy more ETH, or I found a good opportunity, but I don't want to sell my ETH to like earn some yield. I can borrow it, depending, as long as that rate is better than the rate I'm paying, then I'm in good shape, right? I'm making money with my money, right? And that is basically what TradFi does, in a sense of like making money with money, right? We're doing rich people stuff that's open to anybody, right? In essence, that's what I tell everybody. Like, you can do rich people stuff and make more money with your money, right? And those are just two strategies that you can do with like longing with it, right? I have a bunch of assets. I want to stabilize it a little bit. I want to, buy something, invest in something. I can do that, right? And I can do that with the borrow lending market. On the other side, let's say, they're like, Billy, you're crazy. Let's do a short strategy. ETH is going to go down. Absolutely. You can do the same thing, right? I have a bunch of USDC. I can go ahead and borrow that ETH, $20,000 USDC. what I can do with that $20,000, I can sell the ETH for USDC, let the ETH drop to whatever it can go. Let's say it goes to 1,500. I hope not, to be honest. But I can then buy back that ETH at $1,500, pay back my bill, and whatever I kept that's my profit, right? The difference that it dropped, I keep that profit, right? So you can long or short with the assets based on a borrow lending DApp, right? So it's just those are two simple strategies that you can use, simple with the assets that you have, on a sense. So I don't know if there's any questions. I'm kind of watching the screen here, but next one is what makes Katana special, and maybe you've seen this in other ones, is you got negative interest rates, right? You're actually getting paid to borrow. And I don't know any other industry that can ever do this other than like DeFi. I've never gone to the bank and be like, hey, Wells Fargo, fam, I need, borrow $10,000. Hey, we got you, fam. We're going to pay you. Never. Right? Never in my life have I ever seen that in there other than when DeFi, right? So if I get paid to borrow, I want to borrow a lot, because the more I borrow, the more I get paid, right? And that's what happens when we have like a looping strategy, in a sense of like, man, I can borrow more. So what we have is, I deposit some USDC. I'm just using this as an example, and I'm borrowing, this USD, whatever, Billy USD coin, right? That goes into my wallet. What I do is I swap it back to USDC and I redeposit that balance again, and then I borrow what I can again, and I swap it and I balance and I borrow. And basically what happens is my deposit gets bigger and my borrow gets bigger, and so I keep earning more and more on top of that initial money. So with that $100, I was able to borrow 70, and I'm assuming these are like tokens in sense, so maybe without slippage I'm getting 70 again. Just pretend with me, without slippage, and I've deposited 70, then I can borrow at 50 and then deposit and then put 50, and then I can maybe get 35, and I can keep looping it back and forth to where it makes sense, and I keep earning more money on that. So instead of just earning $70 at -2%, now I'm at like $130, $150 on there. So that's like a simple looping strategy that you can use in order to make that. When you have like tokens like ETH and WEETH on there, like you can just keep looping back and forth because the slippage is very minimal, because they're very like tokens, like almost the same value, 1 for 1 on there. But that is kind of like a simple looping strategy that you'll see to take advantage of these negative yields, right? There is no TradFi manager that will say, hey, we found a negative yield, we're going to give you a discount. Never, right? Never will that ever happen in my life. If it does, I will eat my words, I'll eat my shoe. But until then, you got to find these deals, and like these are kind of happening live on Katana right now. So like, if you're not taking advantage of them, well, too bad. Right? It's like, this is why I'm having the series here, so you can actually see. And for builders, right, sometimes you'll see services that kind of flash loan this, right? Because it takes a lot of transactions. I have to deposit, borrow, swap, bring it back, deposit, borrow. Those are a lot of transactions to go back and forth every time. Sometimes people are looping to this 16 times, and then you have to unloop it and pay back and swap back. So 16 times, it's just crazy. So like there's flash loan loopers on there. I know where there's a few teams that are kind of looking into it, but there is an opportunity to do flash loan loops on here on Katana, right? And then for Morpho, there are free flash loans. Alex, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was. So a couple of things here on the like looping in terms of risks. So in the example, you're getting paid to borrow. This is fantastic. Yep. But the strategy is actually profitable even when you're not getting paid, right? If the collateral asset yields more than the borrow. But when you set up the position, you might be making, you might turn your 3% ETH yield into a 9% ETH yield with the total looped position. Yep. But something might happen that causes much of the ETH supply to be pulled from the lending market. This will then push the borrow rates up. And if those rates go above what you're paying, what you're earning on your stake, so let's say you're making 3%, and you open the position and you're only paying, say, 1% to borrow. You're making money there, you're making 2%. If a bunch of liquidity is pulled and then the borrow rates go to 4%, you're losing money on your loop. So you need to be like aware of this risk. Indeed, I have been wrecked here before because I forgot I had a loop position. I checked it, like, oh, it's been like multiple days going backwards. And you got to have it like leave it open to earn it back once the position goes back positive. That's one thing to note of, to be mindful of. Another thing is when you're doing the swapping, and even if you use a protocol with flash loan, you need to check the if you're on an L2 or on or not on the network which has the deepest liquidity for the assets you're using, the borrow asset most importantly. You need to check the price of the borrow asset on the network you're using relative to wherever holds the most accurate price. If the spread at a given time is, let's say you're borrowing on base, and base's price is only 10 bips above the price on mainnet. Not too bad, right? You eat 10 bips on a swap on base, not a big deal. When you're looping it, you say you do 15 loops, that 10 bips actually does become quite meaningful. And then so when your position is finished, you're actually starting backwards, which means that you have to, before you can even withdraw that position, you want to wait, depending on how much you've lost in that time, you might need to wait like a month before you've made back the cost of actually opening the position. Something to be mindful of. I know that there are some protocols that have like auto looping protocols, and this happens to them and their users, and it's like a big thing. I know they're trying to solve it, but if you're going to do the loop manually, something to be mindful of. Also, if you notice the price is out of whack on the network you're using, it's an opportunity. Like you could arb the price yourself and then trade into the pool yourself to set up your position. A little extra alpha there. All right.
Don't ruin my vibe here, Alex, with my arbitrage. Yeah, arbitrage is actually very difficult. Like it becomes a network of speed of like who gets it faster when there's a good opportunity. I was trying to do something in a JavaScript type of like TypeScript server just to try to swap between two dexes, and I was just getting beat on there. Like these Rust guys just like milliseconds closer to the server, and it was just like, man, how do I keep losing every time? And it was just like, without MEV, I suck, basically. But yeah,
but
it's definitely
it's running a would be a fun session actually. How to make an ARB bot, right?
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot of things in the works here of like cool things to do, but in essence is like when I talk to people about that, like maybe 5 people understand it. So I'm like, hopefully now 464 people understand it now, right? And more people that watch the series understand like how this flow works in between it. But yeah, this is kind of like what to look out for, right? You have slippage on your swaps, price differentials on the swaps. Like, so those are so many things that you have to mess with. I like to do things manually to understand how they work. And so once I understand how they work, I can appreciate the tools and what to look out for once I understand it. That's kind of like hopefully the entire global goal of like all of this and everybody's input on like how that happens. Thank you, Alex, for that one.
For sure.
So the limiting exposure. So this one I did a lot, right? Like in the crazy 2024, 2025, where every USDC alternative letter, I think ABZD was being created. I was like, I have no idea who to trust, but the yields are good, right? So the last thing I want to do is swap my USDC for that thing, and then it goes to zero, or trade my ETH to that. So I was looking for markets where I could borrow based on what I had. So I would limit my exposure to it. Think of it like an insurance fee or whatnot, but I would deposit my stable or my ETH and then borrow that exotic stable coin and then pop that stable into a yield, right? And I was earning extra yield, and maybe it was a 5% borrow, 6% borrow, and I was getting 15% or whatever on there. If that stable depegged or did something, not a big deal, because I was in an isolated market and the vault lenders were basically lending out the exotics. So even if it went to 50% on there, I just pay back my 50% and I pull back my USDC, right? So I'm not swapping into it, taking that full exposure. I'm basically paying a rental fee on there to borrow those stables or whatever exotic I wanted to do, earn some yield, do whatever I want with it. And then if things got kind of sticky or I was getting scared, I wasn't, swapping anything. I was just repaying my loan and then getting my initial system out right here. And that's kind of what I would do with a lot of exotics that I wanted to have exposure to, but I didn't want to swap into it or trade my tokens for it, right? I didn't trust it enough, right? Maybe it was too new. Maybe I didn't trust the team, maybe, whatever on there. In essence, theoretically, if it goes to zero, it's ideally because I can pay back all the zero on there, but people tend to pull their liquidity beforehand and time-wise. But within a certain range, I limited my exposure by just putting the asset that I believe in, my blue chip asset, borrowing the exotic asset, doing whatever I could, earning my yield, whatever, and then paying back where I was never really directly exposed to that asset on there. Things to look out for on that, and that same note, was being able to deposit or use your random USD as collateral and then borrowing USDC blue chips, right? Because what happens is kind of a looping strategy, right? You have all these exotic, USD whatever, USDC Billy, and then I would basically deposit onto a vault, borrow USDC that people felt at blue chip, use that USDC, go back to the place that I can mint more Billy USDC tokens, and then keep depositing and looping it back, and then basically inflate my TVL. Look, guys, everybody's depositing their USDC onto my Billy USDC, and it looks great. There's more people depositing, but all I'm doing is just looping it over and over again to inflate my numbers on here, so I can get more depositors and whatnot on there. So you're putting your blue chips at risk with these exotic ones. So I tend to stay away from them. Maybe there's good incentives to do it, but my spider senses tell me don't do it. And in essence, on 1010, a lot of that kind of came true of like, oh, okay, a lot of these kind of unwound and got wrecked on here. But I kind of look out, like if the collateral is the exotic and you can borrow the blue chip, it's always kind of like tread carefully on that kind of system. Make sure that your risk is on there. So you like all this stuff, you're like, man, I'm ready to go in. How do I read my vaults? What's my exposure? And we kind of covered this a little bit on here, but right here, your asset, right? When you're looking at Morpho vaults on Katana, you're going to see all these different names. And this is basically all the vaults that we've dealt with on here. This is your asset that you're going to deposit. Like this is, we're depositing USDC. This is what you were exposed to, right? This is your exposure on here. Is basically telling us in these vaults, we deposit into vaults that have these tokens that can be borrowed off of, right? So I can deposit Bitcoin, and I think that's Lombard or another BTC and some form of ETH. On this Yearn one, we can do some of these Yearn vaults, Wrap BTC, and a couple other Yearn vaults. So I can deposit those tokens and borrow your USDC, right? So if you don't feel comfortable with that token that's sitting on this side, you don't deposit on that vault. In essence, that's pretty much the case on that. Markets here is a little bit different. Markets is where you can actually borrow off of it, right? So you deposit your collateral, right? And this is where your asset from the vault is coming from, right? So the way it works is people deposit USDC into these vaults and they get distributed. People then that borrows want to deposit their asset, and they can borrow your USDC, right? That's pretty much how Morpho works in a sense. The markets get funded by the vaults. The vaults decide where to put that funding in here. So you deposit, your asset, and then your people deposit their collateral, and then your asset gets that exposure. It's 1-to-1. So if you have this one isolated market, you can see that my USDC is here, and this YVVB ETH is basically my exposure at 77% LTV on here. So it's a pretty safe bet. ETH, Yearn Vault ETH is a pretty good one I feel comfortable with. And so I don't mind putting my money in a vault that has this kind of exposure, and they get a nice rate on here. And then you can see this one's like almost negative to rate and whatnot. I took a screenshot, maybe a month ago on this, and then kind of put this together, but just so you can understand what your exposure is, where your money's being, basically isolated to, and then being able to like understand where your money is actually going here. So Katana value prop, right? What does Katana do differently? What the heck is this VB stuff? Because it's hard for me to even say something like, I can't say USDC, I have to say YVVB USDC. I'm like saying every letter of the alphabet. Well, this is what happens on layer 2 networks, right? So this is what kind of makes it special, right? We deposit on a bridge from L1 mainnet, right? And it gets sitting on the smart contract in a sense. So we have this USDC sitting on ETH mainnet on there. Think of it like a casino, right? I have my cash. I want to play some games. They're going to give me some chips, right? So I put my cash is sitting right here in mainnet, and I get tokens minted in L2 that I would say consider my chips. And then I can play whatever I want, and I want to deposit on the lending market, and I earn 4% right here. And that's a good strategy. 4% is a decent number that you can get almost on every chain across the board on an L2. I mean, based on strategies, incentives, volume, it's a decent number, right? And that's pretty much rinse and repeat on all generic L2 chains. What happens in Katana? So when you deposit in the bridge for Katana, It gets deposited into a smart contract, but it's called Vault Bridge, which is basically a portion of that goes into Morpho markets. That's kind of happening here, kind of these markets that you see here. And it is earning yield for you in a sense, yield for people that are actively using, right? So you still get your token chips here, and those are called VB tokens. They're not the native USDC. They're not the native they're called Vault Bridge, VB. That's what the VB stands for, Vault Bridge tokens. Those tokens are by default earning yield on the layer 1. And then we're running our strategy too, right? Again, whatever strategy we're doing on this lending market, 4%. The difference is if you're taking advantage of it, there's multiple sources that are coming in here, right? This is earning yield. So it's earning on the Vault Bridge yield. That can go into chain on liquidity, but it's also being deposited or incentivized for these markets here. We also have things like AUSD that's earning off-chain yield. And in the future, we're all, well, kind of happening now is we having VCAT emissions incentivizing these type of things. So you'll see all the cat rewards and whatnot. So in essence, what's happening is we have this lending market for USDC by default, any strategy that used across the board. But the advantage is we'll have that base rate, but we'll also have a Vault Bridge rate, right? And let's just say it's 2%, maybe it's 1%, whatever it is. I'm just saying 2%. And then we also have these VCAT emissions from the chain. And so in essence, theoretically, we should have the better rate and the better incentives at all times on any other layer 2 network. So you'll always have a better rate base because your assets are working on the layer 1, your assets are working on the layer 2, and the chain itself is looking at ways to incentivize that and you basically reward users that are using the dApps and using stuff on Katana. So that's kind of like one of the major like value props of like when I first heard about Katana and I was looking at it and inspecting it, I was like, man, this is kind of cool because like I said before, when the incentives leave, I leave. I mean, it's just no harm, no foul. It's just other places. But if the incentives can keep going or better than anywhere else, or like it's still within range of competitive, then there's no reason for me to leave. Right. So like as we are campaigning pretty heavily now, when the market is slow, you don't see a lot of incentives. Right. And so what Katana is trying to prove once everything goes live and what you're seeing right now is, you know, we can keep consistently providing incentive. It may not be 70% or 40% at all times, but a very respectable rate where we can be competitive in a sense where we don't have to do anything extra. We don't have to like create crazy deals because we have multiple things working to make that yield a beneficial place for everybody else to basically do what they want to do. I don't know if there's anything you want to chime in on that, guys, but just kind of throwing in that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's so important to understand this, that like anyone can claim that 8% number, but we're showing where it comes from and showing that it's a sustainable source. Like we're not doing anything crazy or anything risky with the assets on chain other than making them work in proven, reliable strategies and then taking the results of that strategy and putting it back into the chain so that the users of the chain benefit from it. And because it is sustainable, it's something that we can do every single day, day after day, forever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I joined Katana. I mean, like, that's one of the as a major DeFi, like, and I think that's one of the main things I want to keep kind of drilling in your head is like the team at Katana actually knows DeFi because we actually use it. And that's one of the major factors. It's not like, hey, let's throw this incentive campaign for 3 months and go. And there's a lot of respectable people that kind of like are out there doing their thing. But the Katana team is like, I mean, the main goal and the main focus is DeFi and how to make the best yield possible. And so the whole system is designed with that in mind, in a sense. So like, that's just something I want to drill down to anybody watching and whatnot. So yeah, just kind of like showing this as well. We basically covering like what VB tokens are. Vault Bridge tokens is basically what we do on the layer 1 is in Vault Bridge. That Vault Bridge yield is then basically rewarding those for those tokens. So one caveat is, and if you're not using the network, you're not earning the yield, right? So if someone has $100 million and they're just not using any of the Katana yield, that yield earned from that $100 million stake is basically getting rewarded to everyone else that is using the rewards and incentives, right? So you can't just, you know, bridge and sit there and expect yield. You actually got to use the stuff. So
but if anyone does have $100 million and they just want to leave it sitting on chain, that's cool too. I'm cool with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Again, my own strategy is like, I have money and I have a certain amount that I put in vaults because of the risk and reward ratio, but I still have money available, 1, to pay back loans, or 2, to jump on an opportunity. I always want to stay liquid, right? I don't want to just do anything. So I don't go all in. I don't YOLO. It's just, I have my own strategies on there of like how I do things. So it's not all 100%. So I realized some of that yield is going to someone else, and I'm fine with it because I'm earning yield too. And some of the yield is coming into my positions as well. But yeah, if you have $100 million, let me be in your circle. I'm down with it. I'm a cool guy. Let me know.
Right.
Yeah. And so let's say this was all fancy to you. And you're like, you know what? I don't want to be locked in. I want to set and forget. This is what I want to do. We have vaults right on the app.katana.network webpage right here. We have vaults that have killer yields, right? They basically hand it for you. Yearn is one of our respected curators. If you haven't heard of Yearn, then I know you don't DeFi for sure, because they've been around since the Andre Conde days of like early times when Yearn was like $30,000 or some crazy amount of tokens on there. And they've been curating since, day one in a sense. And so if you are someone that just wants to set and forget on there, we have vaults ready to go for you. You don't want to manage the looping. You don't want to do all that. Yearn handles it for you already. And you can see the rates are pretty awesome on stables with you can see the breakdown of the native APY, of the basic strategy, the cat based rewards, which are pretty high, the in-app rewards as well. And then basically, if you were an early depositor, if you're not, too bad, but it's okay. Still pretty solid APY.
Still not too late.
Yeah. And so like decent vault, right? And they basically, you set and forget on there, and they will basically do all the strategies that we've been doing across this board, across all this stuff right here. They're handling it for you, right? And so those vaults and any future vaults that may come on here that get vetted by the Katana community team, and what this social community is, whatever your risk factor is. I just want you as a user and someone curious into DeFi to understand what you're exposing to. So many times I see people just deposit because it's a high yield. Like, I don't want you to deposit because it's 40%. Yes, I do, but I don't without you knowing what the risks are involved in that situation, right? I see that, people are so like traumatized from the Luna Terra days that anything over 20% must be a scam. And it's not, right? Again, this 40% may not last forever, but you can see where the yield is coming from. You can see where the incentives are coming from. And so kind of showing you like it is a legitimate type of system that we have going on here. And so that's kind of like what I want you to understand of like, yes, high yields can be scary because like, where does the yield come from? Well, we kind of showed you, right? Exactly how we're doing it in a sense of like why it works, and then how this will work. And then depending on like what your strategy is, how much you want to put in and how much you want to be aware of. So, that's kind of like the whole goal of this borrow lending. I think borrow lending is theoretically one of the easiest ones to understand because it works like a bank and you can kind of understand it. But the things that you can do on top of that, those advanced strategies, looping and then borrowing and doing all these things, might have opened your eyes to something that you didn't know that you could do, or maybe it just didn't click. So like as we do these DeFi series and we go together, we're going to kind of just move that together, like grow together and like kind of open strategies of what I've done. For those that don't know, I also help like Developer DAO run their DeFi strategies for their vault. Anybody that knows open source realizes open source does not make money, right? So in order to pay the bills and keep the lights on, we have to like earn yield. And so with certain strategies that I do, again, we borrow off certain assets and we, create strategies, put in vaults. And so, those are the kind of things we do to kind of like keep the bills paid and keep the lights on. So if there's any other questions, I'm just going to do this live. I'm just going to deposit a Morpho. We're going to check on that old position that I had from the last session with Dexes. And then we're just going to create a borrow lend position and then do something with it.
Let's do it.
I'm going to check and go. Oh, actually, one more thing I did want to kind of show it your way, and I had too many windows to cover it up, is when you see tweets like this is what Vault Bridge actually earns, right? So like we're seeing tweets like Vault Bridge generated 2.8 million in 6 months, right? That's how much money is being earned on the layer one that's being put back into the ecosystem, right? That's the competitive edge. I know when I read tweets, I just see random numbers. I just scroll through it. I'm like, whatever, this is numbers. People throw APYs. I'm like, whatever, it's going to be gone in 90 days. This is like what is actually happening. So when you see like Vault Bridge on there, you can see exactly where that yield is coming from. There's a couple tweets on here of how much is being bought, like I think 55K in the Vault Bridge and AUSD Treasury getting thrown back into the ecosystem for incentives and rewards on there. So definitely keep an eye out for like the Katana, Vault Bridge notifications to see how things are working, what things are moving. The more people that deposit, the more yield that gets earned is basically how this flywheel works. And I know we throw the word flywheel out a lot, and it's kind of slowly starting to make sense of like how each piece moves together as you deposit and as people start moving and using the network, how everybody gets rewarded in that sense on here. So let's check on my position here. So you know that I use DBank, and last session we did the DEXs, and I created some LP positions here, and I have suffered a slight and permanent loss, but no big deal because it wasn't a lot of money. But I earned some fees. You can see that I earned $1.56, $1.48 on those trades and the volumes, and here I earned a little bit as well. So if we look at the sushi positions here, I like using DBank because I can see exactly where I'm at. You see that my range was between 3,000 and 3. I was a little more bullish, and then we went below 3,000, and this one was 2,980, and I guess we're below it right now. Let me just check CoinGecko really quick and see where we're at roughly, and 29. So I'm just out of range. I could rebalance if I wanted to. Maybe I was making money, but you know, that's where I'm at, right? So hey, that's the life of, you know, rebalancing and doing anything. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this money. I'm gonna claim my fees. Actually, I can check how much CAT I have on app.katana.network. See, guys, I actually do use the app. Yeah, so I can check here, and I can check my unclaimed rewards. So I've made $76 based on the CAT value. So if I claim that, I can look at each thing I have. So I create, you know, 50 cents of wrapped ETH. I want to say WETH. I want to say WETH. I'd never know what to say. It's kind of like GIF and GIF. It's never going to make the same for me. But you see, the CAT incentives are crazy. Based on the, you know, the valuation of CAT being, you know, 10 cents, I made $75 on here. So not a bad play if I wanted to cover my impermanent loss on here. So I can definitely, you know, claim that. Let me go ahead and claim that right off the top. And it's easier to claim on the app, guys, to be honest, instead of running around and claiming. And let me go ahead and just close those positions that I have here.
Happy to hear that.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this position. It's all going to be in ETH because, again, the you know, position dropped all the way down. I always hold the lower value asset on here. So, you know, the arbitrageurs, you know, killed it on my liquidity. So there we go. Let me go back. Let me just refresh that really quick. And there we go. I'm just going to close out these positions, and I'm going to actually do it again. But this time what I'm going to do is a slightly different strategy, and we will check back on that on the next time to see where it is, because I'm not going to be locked in this position. I'm not going to be, you know, in the zone watching my position rebalancing every day for $300 or $400 on here. But maybe you should, you know, if you are just starting on here, definitely, you know, consider like locking in and practicing with a low amount. I started practicing with like $100, $150 just to see. But let's go ahead and go to Morpho.
Yeah, on the concentrated liquidity provision, if you're doing it for the first time, really don't put much in.
Yeah,
you're going to learn a lot with small amounts. You will lose money probably, but once you get the hang of it, it'll be very profitable for you.
It's like going to college. I always say,
Exactly.
like, college is working for free. You're working for free for 4 years, 4 or 5 years. Like, you have to do all these homeworks and exams for what? For nothing.
No, the way I look at it is you work with small amounts and you're not actually losing money. You're just paying for your education.
Exactly.
Yeah. You have to get in the trenches to like do it. Like it's like learning basketball from a book. You can read all the books you want, but like until you actually throw the ball, you don't know. Like that's the best example I can say. Like, this is how it goes, you know.
You show up to the court, you're like, oh wow, I was expecting this ball to weigh like 30 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, get in the trenches, guys. Just mess around with it. You know, that's why I always say Katana's a good spot, because the incentives will help make up for your losses, right? It's a kind of a safer place to experiment with, because the incentives are kind of killer. So welcome to Katana Earn, right? Make sure you're on your Katana, you know, connection here. And we're going to go to the borrow. So I'm going to basically deposit my ETH, and I'm going to borrow some USDC. So I can check on my collateral. I can just basically throw it here and see what options I have. So I want to do some ETH, borrow some USDC, right? So I'm going to go in there, and let's see, how much ETH do I have here? What? Oh, I have to do BBE, so I have to wrap it really quick. So if you have the native ETH, you got to swap it over. So
I think there's that little toggle there below the max button.
Oh, boom! There we go. Yes,
Boom.
there we go. Beautiful. Good call. And it's negative, so I'm gonna be making money.
Oh.
Beautiful. Let's
rich.
do 015, $400. And let's see, let's go ahead and supply that collateral. So basically I'm putting it up saying, hey, I want to put up $435 at this going rate for some money. And I want to borrow some USDC. Perfect. All right. So my position is here. I want to borrow. So the max I can borrow is $362. Oops. What's going on here? Let me refresh that, because that sounds too good to you. Morphin went under collateralized. That's nice. I like it. Little bug in my RPC, maybe. All right. Yep. There we go. Max is 362.90, right? Right here, it's letting me know my LTV is pretty close to liquidation. Right now, I'm at 81%. My liquidation is 86. So if we went like 4.3% change in price, like if ETH dropped 4%, I would get liquidated and lose my money, right? So me personally, I'm a 50% and below guy. Why? Because if the market drops a lot, I don't want to like get liquidated while I sleep, right? And so if I'm running a strategy or I'm running something, every time the market shifts 10%, I don't want to have to go running back to my computer and switch and swap or do whatever I want, right? Yes, I could leverage more. Is there more opportunity for me? Yes, absolutely. But I'm not the kind of guy that stays locked in 24/7 on my computer. I like to go out and like see the sun from time to time and not have to constantly worry about it. Luckily, October 10th, this strategy stayed true, where ETH dropped, but I was still safe because I kept it super low and I was able to, come out unscathed on that day. It was insane. I was watching I didn't have my ledger with me and I was watching it drop. I'm like, please don't let this happen. And I was safe. So, it is my strategy to go 50% or lower on there to borrow. That way, if there's any crazy swings in price or, Trump gets on the phone with Greenland and say, hey, let's do some deals. And whatever happens, I am safe, right? I don't take it to the edge. Maybe you have a better risk analysis, awesome. But this is how I go. I'm not going to loop it out here, but I'm going to go ahead and borrow this USDC. This USDC will now go into my wallet. Let's say I was paying a high rate. Let's say I was paying 10% on this USDC, right? I'm just creating liquid, whatever here. Right now I'm earning -% which is amazing. So I'm actually like making money borrowing here. But let's say it was 10%, right? So I got to find something that's going to earn me some 10%. I can deposit it right into the app. Katana.network. I can go right here on the front page and just deposit in this USDC vault and make 40%, right? So if even though I was paying 10% on that one, I'm earning 30% here as a net positive. So I could literally borrow and just deposit here, right? But I'm a little bit more risky. And this is kind of what I did for DevDAO. I like to earn a lot of fees on the money that I make. So again, if you watch that DEX position here, let me explore. I like to earn bigger fees, right? So with that money that I have, I want to do an ETH USDC one again, because that's 187%, better than 40% if I'm willing to take the risk. Again, it's all about risk on here. And so let me go ahead and add some liquidity here. And we've kind of done this before, so I'm going to go a little bit faster. And I'm going to look at my range. I like to look at it in terms of ETH. So I'm just go ahead and zoom out. Let me zoom out a little bit. Is it going to let me zoom? There we go.
It's been kind of slow the last couple of days.
Yeah. So you remember we had the range of how much liquidity we wanted to put in, what the ratio was, and then I could be earning 55% in here if I want it a little bit tighter. Let me go a little bit crazier, and 61%. That sounds pretty good. It's better than the one that I was using, right? Main price, and then I can zap in if I wanted to zap in USDC. I'm just going to go ahead and zap in that $150 amount. Right, so now I'm using that $150 that I borrowed, and theoretically, if I stay in range of this 2867 and the 3062, I'll be making 61%. And so even if I was paying 10% on that borrow, I'm earning 51%, assuming I stay in range. Well, I think it's stay in range. Not really. Actually, let me go a little bit softer here. Maybe we go up. I'm more bull. We'll see. And so there we go, 50%. But let me go ahead and zap in. Oh, did I not approve this? There we go. Let me go ahead and approve this 150. And remember, if you approve, you're basically telling this contract, hey, I'm allowing you to take $150 out of my wallet, right? It's like telling your girl or your deadbeat boyfriend, hey, can I borrow $20? Yes, you can take $20 versus take anything you want, right? So you want to make sure you're specific with that kind of stuff.
It's the difference between handing them a 20 and handing them the PIN code to your debit card.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and zap in there. And let's see how we look. There we go. And let me see my position. It takes a little while sometimes for the indexer to come in. Let's see who's faster, this or DBank. So DBank sees my morpho position. You see that I'm at 50%. So you can see my health rate is nice and healthy, 2.55. I like seeing big numbers with my health rate. When it starts getting close to 1, it starts getting yellow. And then when it gets really close, it starts getting red. And that's when I start getting nervous on here. But you can see my balance. You can see as my debt grows, it's $150. And then eventually you'll start seeing 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. It'll keep growing. And that position, depending on how ETH goes, like it'll just change my health rate. So I use this as like my overall look on that. And it's just not checking here on Sushi. Indexer is taking a little while from time to time. Or did I do that? Did I actually have a position here? Or did I just like forget and like actually not deposit here? 1 second. Let me check my balance here. And this is what happens with that. I didn't actually deposit. So that's why it didn't show. Let me see what happened. And this is what happens when you go live, guys. Yeah.
It may have been just an approval to Enzo, potentially.
Yeah, I think with the zap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, let me just change this range manually here. Let me just... You know what? It just wanted me to do 100x. That's what happens. You know, let me just go 100%. That was the sign.
It's a sign from the gods.
That's it. 150. Different range, so I'll probably have to pre-approve it again. But yeah, no questions so far. So hopefully it's kind of clear that things are going. And again, this will be referenced all the time. So like this will build off to the next one, right? And let's see if my position has taken. There we go. And now I'm live and now I'm earning fees. I made a billionth of a penny so far. So look at me balling. All right. And so there we go.
Heading
Again,
to
a little
Starbucks
bit of
after this.
Yeah. A little bit of slippage on that swap, right? That's what happens when we swap from the dexes. And let's see if I can check my portfolio here and see if it starts catching up. And there we go. I can see both my positions here. So I can see that live on there. I can check my health and I can check my position to see how much money I'm making. So basically, if this reward and the cat rewards are higher than what I owe, I am making money in a sense. And so if we learned about like the balancing and everything, if ETH takes off and I'm stuck with a whole bunch of USDC, I have made money and I can pay back this loan. I will have more than $150 on there because I'll be dollar costing average ETH out in this pool, and then I can pay back my loan and then still have my exposure to ETH on there. So like I'm bulling, and that's one of the strategies I did for Developer DAO is we kept doing that as it went from 2,000 to 4,000. We kept writing those LP positions, earning those fees on the way up. But then what happens when ETH goes down, right? And the market goes down and everything. Well, that's for the perps tutorial about explaining how to run a strategy, how to run delta neutral, and then earning these yields, right? With these yields that we get, like in this universal learning, right? And these vaults. If you look at the vaults and you look at these vaults tomorrow, they will change, right? It might be 4%, might be 2%, might be whatever percent. But what if you could lock in your yield, right? What if it was a nice yield that you saw, 10%? I wish I could lock this in and then have this forever. Well, that's where the PTYT tokens come in and the yield tokenization on there. So we have a lot more coming up with the yield tokenization, the cat, and the perps on there. So, I mean, stay tuned to see if I get wrecked. I am not going to watch this position. So if ETH goes down, let's see what happens if I get liquidated. And I'm like, because Morpho, you can liquidate your entire position. So let's see what happens when we do this. Did I lose this money or not? Stay tuned and find out to see what happens on it. But this is just
cliffhanger. Will I get wrecked? It's fantastic.
yeah. So that's kind of like watch me win money or watch me lose money, right? Like, will the strategy work in this market? Is kind of curious, and I'm willing to gamble on that. Like, I could add more zeros, and if that win was big, it would have been big, or I lose it. So that's why I'm keeping it kind of small on here. But definitely, something to consider, right? Like if you're super locked in and you want that higher range, absolutely, right? And again, with all these strategies, I'm still earning money on this borrow. I'm earning incentives here. If I wanted to drop it on the app, I absolutely could have, and it was a little bit less risky. At any time, I can unwind these positions. I can unwind the sushi position and then pay back my loan. I'm not locked in for anything, right? So like at any time when I'm not feeling comfortable, I have the ability to pull out without any penalties other than maybe some impermanent loss or, some interest earned, right? It's just a little bit of like what my risk reward ratio is. And that's something that I want to keep throwing and drilling down in your head is like risk reward, right? Nothing is free in DeFi. What are you willing to risk for what return? And with Katana, those returns are better, to be honest. So, that's why I use it. That's why I promote it in a sense. Like I have my own bags in there. So like I'll bleed with you guys if we bleed. It's just one of those things that we that happens in the space on there. So I think that's kind of where we're gonna end it on here. I don't know if you guys have any final quotes, but thank you guys for like the input and like keeping me from being boring in a sense overall.
Awesome session, Billy.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
That was great. Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. I'm not sure exactly. I think we might be able to do this next week with the PTYT. It really depends on when things happen. And like we definitely want to do a cat token session before TGE on there. I don't know the details on that. So maybe like sometime in February we'll do it with Alex, because Alex is kind of like the mastermind of that. And if you're not following Alex or Will or myself, like why not? our Twitter handles are like really like right there. So make sure to follow to keep up like what's happening.
We've done everything we could except click the follow button for you.
Yeah. So like if you want to know what's happening in Katana or what my stupid takes are on the internet, I've been kind of busy, so I haven't been able to like say stupid things on Twitter yet, other than like retweet or talk about Katana. But I have my own things. I tried making like a trading bot on the perps, and I lost a lot of money. Theoretically, what I put on there. So like just keep up with it, and like as we educate more folks and as we start moving along, we're going to start going, and now that you know how this stuff works and now how you know strategies play, how can you build, right? Especially with the vibe coders, right? Like we don't have anything that has like a DeFi saver to save your own liquidations on Katana yet. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to like make tools for themselves, or a lot of founders to see opportunity to build on Katana too. So if you are looking to build on Katana, I'm the guy to talk to, right? I understand the pain points. I understand what would be great for Katana, and like understanding how this could all work as an ecosystem together. So if you have any questions, definitely reach out. If you have any comments, definitely reach out. If not, if you don't like me, then reach out to Will and Alex. Whatever. You got options.
Sure.
Yeah. And if you're looking to build, like one of the things I like to do is build to improve my own understanding of the domain. And if you're not sure what to build, go back and rewatch this stream, because the entire time Billy dropped like hints and ideas of things that you can work on throughout the whole thing. So if you're struggling for ideas, go back and rewatch this, and then ping us in X and let us know what you built.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, a lot of people from the Dex one have DM'd me like on Twitter and Telegram about some questions. And I think hopefully I've answered everybody on there that have questions on there. So like I'm accessible, and I was even traveling like for the last week and some, and I was still answering questions. So I'm pretty accessible. So if you don't hear from me in 24 hours, something's wrong. The DeFi gods took me, I was sacrificed. Definitely reach out. I'm pretty accessible on there, especially if you're looking to build. I like talking tech talk too, and getting into the trenches of this stuff. So yeah, definitely reach out. I'm gonna put you on the spot, Alex. Any final words?
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar. Like, please, like, play around on Katana. Try to like set up some positions. If you get confused or have an idea or something, just feel free to reach out, like at me. And I'm happy to chat DeFi or your strategy. If you have like an idea of a strategy, just write it out, ping me. We can chat about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think Katana itself as a community has the most engagement over anything I've seen. Like people tag me all the time and I'll respond or like or do something on there. Even some of the bots, I'm like, is this a bot or not? But I'm going to like it anyway. I don't know if that kills my engagement, but I'm with it. So, just definitely feel free to ping the team. I think like having everybody on the stream lets you know like that we're humans. We're in the trenches. We're users just like you. We're interested in this just like you. So like definitely reach out and all that. And I don't know. Are you guys going to be at Eat Denver? I don't know if you people catching on the stream. Will you guys be at Eat Denver by any chance?
So far, my plans include ETH Denver, subject to change depending on, engineering is touch and go sometimes. But
100%.
yeah,
Yeah,
currently planning on it.
I'm not going to be able to make it, unfortunately, but maybe the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex doesn't like the cold. I don't either, but I'm probably going to be there anyway. We can all meet. We can all meet at the Yard House. It's probably the fine dining of Eat Denver or whatever. But yeah, if you are heading out to one of these IRL events, make sure there's usually a Katana rep there. Make sure to seek us out. DM. Hey, you guys going to be there? Coffee. I might buy you coffee, or I like when you buy me coffee. Either way, I'm pretty cheap date. Anyways. Thank you guys so much. I will go ahead and remind people on the Luma of when the PT tokens are going to come up, and then also keep an eye on there. So sign up for the Lumas. If you're not following Katana on X, why not, right? And make sure to follow everybody for the alpha here. I might spill some information, or maybe not, probably not, but you never know. I might be crazy on the tweets. But thank you guys so much, and we will catch you later.
Right on. See everyone.
Appreciate it.